not in my words, not in that way, not in my name, not in my faith, not in my words, not in that way.
Welcome, viewers, to another edition of A Muslim's Perspective. Peace and blessings of God be with you. We praise God Almighty, and we ask Him for guidance and forgiveness, and we seek protection in God from the malice of our own souls and the evil of our actions. Whom God guides, no one can lead him astray, and whom He makes astray, no one can lead him back to the right path. I bear witness that there is no other deity but God Himself, no associate to Him, and I bear witness that Muhammad is His servant and messenger. Our guests today are Brother Taha Gayoor from Justice for All, and Sister Tunisia Matsidik Kira, who is joining us by video link. But first, allow me to introduce both our guests. Sister Tunisia Matsidik Kira is a Uyghur. She studied at the Teachers University in East Turkistan. She has a bachelor's degree in chemistry and Chinese language and graduated Vancouver Community College from a nursing program. She immigrated to Canada, and she's the mother of two Canadian-born twins. Canadian-born twins, not two, but two souls. Her son currently serves in the Canadian military. And we are no stranger to Brother Taha, really a committed activist. I don't particularly like that word, but really hard-working individual. He is driven by a spirit of community service and a desire to share our faith experience creatively. He mobilizes our community to various causes, including human rights. He's a writer, an inspirational speaker, a TV host, and he has been leading groundbreaking and impactful community initiatives for over 20 years across North America. And we have a whole list of organizations and positions that he has held over those 20 years, but for the purposes of time, we would not go into that today. Google him, you'll find out much more than you need to know at this time. On a serious note, there is a millennial-old campaign to build and reinforce Islam and Muslims as oppressive, subversive, illiterate barbarians devoid of moral and ethical and virtuous boundaries. Are these notions, as prevalent as they may be, truly representative of the lived experience of Muslims, both in the historical and contemporary context? When we examine the example of the Prophet Muhammad, our guide, our example, the perfect human being, the most virtuous of all, we learn that he was consistently on the side of those who were powerless, marginalized, widowed, orphaned, enslaved, impoverished. He was for gender equity. He, was representing the girl children, many of whom were killed in their early childhood and buried alive, the homeless, those with disabilities, etc. All in stark contrast to the narrative in popular discourse for 1,000 years. Traditional Muslim societies, after the demise of the four rightly guided caliphate, were ruled by usurpers of power with few exceptions. The Muslim masses were subjects of rulers. They had no choices in electing. The independent scholars guided the masses to gaining eternal salvation and earn the trust of the masses with their selfless service. With the development of the modern state, the ability of authoritarian rulers to exercise total control over its subjects have become absolute. The rights of citizenship recognized in liberal democracies are fading. Diversity is increasingly seen as a national security threat, so the state uses its instruments of control to insist on its way or imprisonment or even death. Examples of Muslim populations being subjected to bad governance starts within the borders of many Muslim majority countries and extend to those which Muslims live as minorities. The line of defense of the attackers since 9/11 is to suggest terrorism by the victims of their atrocities and the world do not examine much after that label is attached. Dispossession, disability, death, statelessness, etc. are the consequences of indigenous Muslim populations in many countries. Today, we focus our discussion on one such indigenous population, the people of East Turkistan, which China call Xinjiang, if I am pronouncing it correctly. Sister Tunisia, can you give our viewers a brief historical overview of the people of East Turkestan?
Yeah, East Turkestan is our ancestral homeland of Uyghurs and other Turkic people. Since the known history, and Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, other Turkic people have been living in the part of that world in East Turkestan with their own unique culture, language, agriculture, architecture and script, and made great contribution to the human history and human civilization.
A part of East Turkestan history. What happened?
Is the when you look at the history, is the East Turkestan, and we have built our ancestry. They have Uyghurs empire, Uyghurs kingdom, and Uyghurs statehoods, and we have a lot of empire. For example, is the 8th century, and we have Turpan Empire established in East Turkestan, 9th century. Karahan Kingdom established, and we have empire kingdoms since China's military invaded East Turkestan, and even before assist Chinese government invaded occupied East Turkestan 1949. It's only happened 1949, and we still our ancestry fought and established and two government 1933 and 1944. But the two government with the help Soviet Union at that time, and then also Chinese NCist Red Communist Party and Chinese government, and our two government one after another, and they failed. And 1949, the Chinese government assist new communist government invaded and occupied East Turkestan.
And since then, China has treated East Turkestan as a part of its territory, not an independent state?
Is only they think it's right now when you look at the map, and it's part of China, but the East Turkestan is our ancestral homeland of Uyghurs and other Turk people. And then East Turkestan never ever belongs to China. This is only political. Also, the Chinese government is the military occupation of the East Turkestan.
Sure.
And just to add to what Sister Tunisia said, I mean, Uyghur people were independent people all these centuries, and the first attempt by the Chinese external dynasties was back in 1759, which is when basically Manchu's dynasty basically conquered part of it or a big chunk of it. And then it was really not really until 1884 when the Qing dynasty military leader, Chinese military leader, who actually called, for the first time, named as Xinjiang. And of course, Turkic people, specifically the Uyghur people, of course, never accepted that. And from their perspective, Xinjiang just basically means new territory. So this was the first time a label was put on there. But it was really, as Tunisia very rightly said, it was really not until 1949 when the full-fledged occupation with the Russian, backed by Russia, that happened, and it was then named Xinjiang, province, basically by the Chinese government.
So it was another one of the colonial settlement displacement of indigenous people and their cultures, languages, religion, everything since then.
Absolutely.
Sister,
East Turkistan is our ancestral the homeland, and just like I said earlier, is very interestingly is the Chinese story actually written is the 8th century. We have Turpan Empire and 9th century in Karahan Kingdom, and then only Chinese government occupied East Turkestan 1949. Yeah. And it's new territory for China and Chinese people. Yeah.
Yeah. Similar to the new territories that the Spain and the British and so on had in the Caribbean and in other parts of the world as well. It's just a colonial settlement. So how long has East Turkestan been associated with Islam, the Muslims?
Uyghurs are Muslims since 915 AD, and the Uyghurs' first king Sultan Stukbukra Khan during Karahan Kingdom, and the whole kingdom actually accepted and have embraced Islam. And since then, we practice Sunni. The part of the Sunni of the Islam, and we have been practicing the way the Sunni Muslim. Yeah.
And in terms of the current condition of the people of East Turkestan, there's so many reports of concentration camps and demolition of mosques and so on. Can you give us briefly some of the things that are occurring in East Turkestan today?
Unfortunately, it's happening right now, even while we're speaking. And since China's government occupied East Turkestan, the genocide is happening periodically, continuously. Only the world come up to know about this genocide last 4 or 3 years because of the high technology, because of the Chinese government, especially Xi Jinping takes power, and they built the huge concentration camps, and then also they established as a prison like more than the horrible prison, modern day concentration camps. And I was actually the chemistry instructor, and then when I work as an instructor and we're not allowed to practice any Islam, we have to report to the school and we have to fill out the form, and I don't do namaz, I don't do pray, and we're not allowed to have hijab. And even before the many years, and I came to Canada 2006, and at that time we still not allowed to practice like fully our religion. People not allowed to do pray, not allowed to read Quran, not allowed to fasting, and the last 4 or 5 years, and it's getting worse than ever. And the women, they don't allow to have hijab, they don't allow to have even long skirt. Maybe you already saw a lot of video about while women on the street walking, Chinese authority cut off their long skirt, and it's very, very terrible. And don't even think about what they're gonna do at home, because Chinese government sent 1.1 million Chinese cadre stay in Uyghurs and other Turkic people's home, supervise them 24 hours. If someone try to even quiet few minutes, they think they do pray, and taken to the concentration camps, and then Quran, our heads are burnt, and thousands of mosque, our millennium traditional, very historical mosques are demolished, and a lot of facility related to Islam, our madras, they are not allowed to function as a mosque and madras. And Chinese government turned a lot of mosques to bar right now. Maybe you already saw a lot of video about it. And the Islam is banned. You cannot have even Islamic name like Aisha, Muhammad, and the Ali, and it's banned as well. And you cannot have halal any Lego, and the halal Lego halal food is banned. That's why people in East Turkistan, they are forced to eat pork, even in the modern day concentration camps, also in their home. They forced to drink alcohol during the Ramadan, forced to eat pork, forced to give up our religion of Islam.
And there is no form of resistance that's allowed because the surveillance and enforcement mechanism is right in your face every day.
Yes, yes.
I understand that you can't even have a Quran in your house, nor a traditional prayer mat, or any semblance of Islam symbolic, as little as a moon and a star you couldn't have anywhere, even in your house. And that while the men are imprisoned, they send non-Muslim Chinese men to stay with the families and do whatever they need to do, and forcing Muslim girls to marry non-Muslim men. Are those reports verified?
Yeah, you're right.
This is how it is on the ground?
Yeah, this is what's happening. And this is what we know until today. And then imagine what we don't know. It's more horrible. Yeah. And then even outside of the concentration camp or inside of the concentration camp, and then gang raped, regardless women or men, and regardless age.
Well, thank you, Sister Tunisa, for your courage sharing all these very heartbreaking stories. And, we know many Uyghurs like you in Canada who have family members who are suffering back home. Just to add to what you just said, just putting numbers to what we were talking about a little bit. It is estimated anywhere from 1 to 3 million Uyghurs, especially men, are in these world's largest concentration camps ever since Nazi Germany camps. And we also know, based on reports, as Tunisia just mentioned, about 1 million plus Han Chinese men have been forced upon Uyghur families. And just imagine, Uyghur men are not home. They are in concentration camps. So who are they living with? These are their women, their wives, their daughters, their sons, their wives, son, daughters, mothers, essentially. Moreover, we're talking about at least 500,000 children who have been put in orphanages. And that's the whole program of dismantling the Uyghur family system. Recently, I have been more involved with some of the indigenous, community work in Canada, or indigenous reconciliation work, I would say, and just scratching the surface. And as we know, what we heard about residential schools in Canada, how decades ago families were separated. You see very similar parallels here by the Chinese government, which is well orchestrated. And the idea is to completely dismantle, completely destroy the culture and the family system of Uyghur people. And these are just a few things we know. There are 50 things, according to human rights Watch report in 2018. In 2018, there are 50 things that can land you in a concentration camp. As simple as saying things like, do not lie. Telling somebody to simply do not lie, do not cheat, let alone eating halal or wearing hijab or anything else that that you just talked about. Staying silent for some time, or eating before early morning or pre-dawn, eating something would be suspicious. You'd be suspicious of actually
Yes.
fasting, right? So these are some of the things that you can think about that you may be, that as Tunisia said, we are aware of. There's so much more that we're not aware of.
Sister Tunisia, can you
Yes.
speak about the use of technology in the surveillance society that now East Turkestan is? Aside from the human interaction where you have these handmen in the homes, how is technology being used to ensure the control over the people of East Turkestan?
Is they use very high technology, and then is the also Huawei is the one of the big tool for the Chinese government, and then is they establishes they built every single family in front of the family, the mosque. They have camera in the street. They have camera, and then Uyghur people, also other Turkic people in East Turkestan, if they have a smartphone, they force it to download one of the Chinese spy app, and then that app can also tell Chinese the police on who they have been contact with, and where they gonna go, like a tracking. And even is the East Turkestan, if someone has the family members like me, and they cannot talk to their family members, and for example is the WhatsApp and Facebook, and I don't even talk about the other. For example, is the Instagram, other communication tool, and not even YouTube allowed in East Turkestan. But the Chinese official actually make a lot of propaganda YouTube, and try to make blind of the international community, and that's why is the where Uyghurs outside of East Turkestan right now, we cannot contact our family member, and even China initiated 5G by Huawei to the world, but for the Uyghur people and other Turkic people in East Turkestan, they have no rights to use a phone call to outside of the world. That's why if you think the one thing is why world, even our Muslim community didn't hear about the Uyghur other Turkic people in East Turkestan before even 3 or 4 years ago. And you have to think that's the reason Chinese government the hold and very serious control about the Uyghur people, about any news in East Turkestan, like almost since they occupied East Turkestan. The media, everything works for Chinese government, and the high technology actually brought a lot of disaster, horrible consequences to Uyghur people, because of we're first human being. We are totally different from Chinese people, and they treat us not even like same as other people in China, and that's why our hope to be independent, even it's too late or too early, we don't know. It's only Allah knows. That's why we have been fighting for our freedom and to try to reestablish our freedom country.
And the Chinese are saying that they are taking these measures in order to prevent terrorism. Have the Uyghur people, the people of East Turkistan, been involved in, other than seeking independence, in terroristic acts?
Sorry, can you repeat it again?
I said the Chinese are saying that they have these policies just to prevent terrorism. You know, they label everything Muslims do as terrorism, even though you're fighting for individual freedoms without even violence.
Yeah, that's what China tried to say, especially after 9/11, and China used this terrorist label to Uyghurs, and then they don't have any weapon, they don't have even protect themselves, their family members, and they still try to show the Uyghurs are terrorists. If you look at a lot of research, China only shows like a two accident or I would say incident in Kunming or Beijing. The Uyghurs they try to do something, but they never actually put in the media anything happened in East Turkestan. The millions of people are in concentration camps, and millions of people outside the concentration camps live like in open prison, and then they also use organ harvesting. If you do research, China is the number one country use like sell human organs, and even you can find halal organ. Where those halal organ comes from?
We need to take a short break, and we will continue after that with this development until we get back, viewers.
Not in my faith, not in my words, not in that way.
Yes, Sister Tunisa, before we broke, you were speaking about organ, the harvesting of organs. Please explore what is happening. Are these organs being taken from those in concentration camps? How are they organized and you know, to do this sort of rape of the human body in this kind of way without, you know, any permission being given? I mean, it's like worse than animals. You don't do that.
There is no permission. Is the people like Uyghur and other Turkic people in East Turkestan, is whenever Chinese government needs, they taken away from the street, from the home, from the workplace, they just disappear. And I have witnessed it a few of my co-workers as well when I was in East Turkestan. And then family members, they have no rights to ask where other family members, and that's why there is we cannot even talk about the permission. And the Chinese government is after the massive build of concentration camps, they also built beside the concentration camps is the oh my gosh, tip of my tongue. Coronation center is which burn the body which doesn't acceptable in Islam. And if someone died in concentration camp and then body doesn't given to the family members, and family members, they have no right to ask for it. And we have a lot of the testimony given, and then the video, and who works for the organ harvesting, even Chinese doctor, Uyghur doctor who works for this issue, they have testimony. We have witnessed it because of their brave work, and that's why we continue work on it to tell people ask them to engage this organ harvesting. The people disappear, and you never find any news about these people, and then family, they can't find. They can't even ask from the police in the police station, the police of the office. They just disappear. Because they have built the cremation center beside the concentration camp. They try to destroy the evidence. Also, is the big city like the where I born in Hotan, like Kashgar, the beside the in the airport, and you have there is a picture, and there is a like the way the special the way the organ human organ the traveling only this exit for the human organ traveling, and you can see this all the label in the airport, and you can see a lot of ads about the halal organ. And the halal organ absolutely comes from East Turkestan, from the Uyghur and other Turkic people.
They done effective and efficient logistics to harvest human beings as if they were a plantation of some kind.
Absolutely.
Have they no decency left, to quote a famous quote?
Subhanallah. No doubt.
Subhanallah. Sister Tunisia, might we turn now to Brother Taha and Justice for All. Can you give us an insight in terms of the campaign and what inspired you to bring about this campaign and what is...
Well, thank you for that opportunity to share some of these details about the Justice for All campaign, specifically Save Uyghur campaign. So it was back in early 2018, late 2017. That's when Justice for All team decided to launch Save Uyghur campaign. Before that, we were focusing on Burma Task Force and other campaigns. But when the atrocities of what's happening to Uyghur people came to light, even though we have been talking about it, we knew about what was happening for decades actually. That's when we realized, it's time to mobilize the community, our countries, and the world. So Save Uyghur campaign basically has been asking for the past 4 years. Number one ask has been immediate shutdown of concentration camps. Number two is reunification of families who are being separated forcibly. And then, of course, essentially access to East Turkistan or Xinjiang province, as they call it, by media, free access, unfettered access to media, human rights activists, and so on. And of course, ending, fourth one being at least, ending organ harvestation, forced organ harvesting. There's just so much that we can talk about that is happening, and we have to, of course, prioritize. I mean, there are issues of forced harvesting, forced indoctrination, concentration camps, forced orphanages. There's so much. But these are some of the key priorities that we have been calling on Canadian government as well as American government to actually take action on. Of course, we have been working very closely with some wonderful Uyghur organizations in Canada in particular. Through the wonderful collective efforts, we are seeing, of course, now momentum in the Canadian government. So the two things that we are seeing over the past 3 years especially, one is a lot more coverage in the media of Uyghur issue. We ourselves have written and published op-eds specifically on what's happening to Uyghurs in East Turkestan and of course Uyghurs around the world. But also there's a lot more media coverage thanks to several documentation leaks, of course, classified document leaks published by New York Times and others, but also, of course, other human rights organizations like Amnesty International, specifically Human Rights Watch, essentially developing a lot more reports. We are seeing a lot more Uyghur organizations, along with us, also publishing very, specific reports on specific issues. So we published just last year a report with UHRP, which is based in the U.S., a report on the dismantling of Islam in East Turkestan by the, of course, current communist government, specifically over the last good 4 to 5 decades in particular, and specifically their treatment of ulama and scholars. what they have done to almost to 2,000 imams that they were able to, they had access to. So there's a mega database, but there's also specifically they were able to reach out to many of the imams who are all been imprisoned. Hussein Jalil is, by the way, who is a Canadian Uyghur, is one example we can talk about. But there are many. I mean, according to that survey, 25% of those imams who were surveyed were in prison for at least 20 years. And most of the time it's actually, of course, arbitrary. There's no so-called terrorist connection to any terrorism. But these are some of the things that we are seeing. And from our perspective, we are pushing the Canadian government. So thanks to a lot of advocacy efforts and a lot of the wonderful people on the ground who are also mobilizing, we were able to, of course, get the Canadian government last year to, of course, early this year, declare what is happening, of course, there, a genocide, which is significant, even though, unfortunately, our Prime Minister and the Liberal cabinet ministers did not participate and they abstained, but as a parliament, it's the first in the world that actually declared it a genocide because it has consequences. And now we are seeing, of course, more recently, the diplomatic boycott of the Olympics. So, these are some significant, even though symbolic, but significant steps, because now we are working on some very specific legislative actions, more specifically around the blocking of supply chains that are connected to Xinjiang province, which are connected to, of course, forced labor work, as has been documented very categorically by many human rights organizations, and also now more so, and also on organ harvesting. There have been some legislative work that is happening on these areas as well. So these are some of the things that we are working on with a lot of wonderful Uyghur activists and leaders.
It's how do you shame people who have no decency to act differently?
That's a tough one, to be honest. When economic interests and political interests are top of mind, in fact, that's the only thing you're obsessed with. Sadly, morality and moral compass, basically completely disintegrates, and it's not something that you care about. And you can see that, for instance, it's a similar question that people ask: what were people, what was Catholic Church doing when some incredible atrocities were being enforced on indigenous children, decades ago? Where was their morality? These were religious people, right? Same thing can be said today about any dictator and groups of people who are, many of whom may not be even directly involved, but completely silent, whether Muslim leaders or leaders of the world who are just watching, just as bystanders, watching an entire nation of anywhere from 7 million people basically die in front of under genocide.
The question is what is the common factor for their silence? And it's support for authoritarian rule over people. More and more artificial intelligence technologies are being used to surveil people and to have them conform to state acceptable quote-unquote behavior and actions. And it's 1984 being revealed itself.
You're right.
And in spite of there being so many Islamic organizations worldwide of political leaders, this silence is deafening. And then they wonder why young people want to take actions in their own hands.
Exactly.
It's unfortunate, but if you do not care for us, when our faith, the very ethos of our faith is to care for the vulnerable. And this is why they need to use techniques and tools available in modern state to basically eliminate those voices.
Yep, you're right. You're right.
And it's sometimes when you hear a singer express in naats and so on, the tremendous love for our Prophet ﷺ, it brings to mind the stark contrast of what we are yearning for.
And where we are today.
His humanity was such that he sought to bring the human experience regardless of what economic or physical or intellectual deficiencies you may have, to have your human experience fully exercised.
Right.
And that is what is missing today. And it has to go beyond the songs. You have to relate his compassion and his mercy to what is missing in our rulers contemporarily.
Absolutely. You're right.
When you hear some of the beautiful verses, about his conduct and his smile and his never turning away anyone, and no one's cup was left unfull.
SubhanAllah. So powerful. And we are so far from it.
So far from it. People say, well, I never heard about the Uighurs. What is this about? No decency left in you?
You're right. You're right.
Right? It's tremendous. They're not even raising their voices.
Yep.
And it's left to common folks like yourself and Sister Tunisia, who is experiencing this firsthand,
Yep.
to raise their voices. What other specific impacts are we seeing in terms of this raised voices around the world with whatever remains of liberal democracies?
Well, what we are seeing is, well, first of all, of course, the world is getting more and more polarized in some ways. Of course, our activism is in some way, of course, being also used by Western governments when it comes to peddling their own agenda against China. So some ways it's a positive thing, but it is at the same time very opportunistic. From our perspective, if the American government and Canadian government and Western governments are taking a harder stance against China, and if it impacts their trade, of course, it's something that we are concerned about. But at the same time, we want to make sure that, as we always talk to the Canadian officials about and our MPs about, we need to ensure that our political interests and economic and trade interests should never be at the expense of human rights of any individual around the world. And in this case, in particular, we know that majority of the clothing coming out of China is either somehow linked to the forced labor of Uyghur people, or it's coming from the cotton itself directly from that region, which is the largest producer. We know that 1/5 of world's ketchup comes from there, including Heinz ketchup. We know that 40% of China's coal is actually in Xinjiang province or East Turkistan. Now, all of this is being exploited by the Chinese government for their own financial gains. And of course, let's not forget about the One Belt project, which is a very strategic project that which is one more extra reason or one more reason why they want to control East Turkestan and Uyghur people. So that being said, there is a lot more awareness now, which is which is a good thing. How it plays out in future, only we'll see. But we're hoping that all of this puts a very direct diplomatic pressure on China to stop, to shut down concentration camps and give East Turkestan, people in East Turkestan their freedom.
The Belt Roadway, that is really re-establishment of the Silk Road. So what they want the Silk Road is the economic benefits of it without the cultural exchange and the religious exchange between people. Hence, they want to depopulate the Uighurs in East Turkestan, and they can put friendly Chinese on the borders so that they wouldn't be influenced from across border trade. Let's see how that plays out. Because if you look at YouTube, for example, and you see a lot of Westerners go to Muslim societies, and they're so, enthusiastic about the hospitality which they are received, the open sharing of food, the welcoming. I mean, I've read one sentence that the difference between the Muslims being so easily, dominated is their treatment of strangers.
You're right.
We are taught to treat strangers with hospitality, yet strangers seem to treat us with such tremendous hostility and suspicion. What are we missing? Aren't we being hospitable enough, caring enough? Aren't we demonstrating our faith as a lived experience enough? Sometimes, all of these questions come to mind.
Of course. That's a very good point.
So it is
The
a
contrast is very.
it's incumbent in that you get to know a Muslim and it's like, what are they talking about?
You're right.
You know,
Right.
tell us something about Hussein Jalil and you know, what was the difference between his case and the two Michaels?
The difference is that he is not white, and he is probably not born and raised in Canada, perhaps. And his crime was and is that he happens to be an Uyghur Muslim who happened to be an imam back in the days, who happened to be raising voice, of course, for his people. Hussein Jalil was calling, his initial crime was essentially in 1994, I believe, he called adhan, or call to prayer, in his hometown and on a loudspeaker. That was his crime, for which he was detained for several days. Once he was freed, afterwards, he of course escaped. He was able to eventually, basically through Turkey, came to Canada as a refugee. And once he came to Canada in 2005, he became a citizen of Canada, full-fledged citizen of Canada. And I guess his mistake was that he went back to Uzbekistan to meet his in-laws along with his family, along with his wife and kids in 2006. That's where he was detained by, of course, the Uzbek police, and then basically transferred over and given over to the Chinese government, which denies his Canadian citizenship, first of all. And the saddest part is that he has, of course, his family, his children. One of his kids is has a severe disability. His wife has been raising these children for the past 15 years on her own, without their kids have ever been able to see or talk to, being able to connect to, or even knowing that their father is alive. Kamila, his wife, Sister Kamila, who lives here in the Greater Toronto area, has never been able to even speak to him for the past 15 years, has no idea even if he's alive at this point. And a very minimal contact was. And this real betrayal of Canadian government has been that the Canadian consul there has not ever been cooperative, and especially last few years has not been cooperative at all. Have not even taken on his case as something that, as a Canadian, that a Canadian deserves.
Not even a consulate visit.
Not a consulate visit even, and this is the sad part. This is he has no consul.
So he was essentially kidnapped from Uzbekistan and taken back to East Turkistan or Xinjiang or wherever in China that he's imprisoned, and nothing has been heard from him since.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, hardly any connection. There were some attempts in the beginning. There were some connections with the consul there at the time, but unfortunately, his whereabouts are not even known at this point. And this is the hypocrisy, unfortunately, that we need to address. And this is we are so relieved that both Michaels have made it safe, sound, and alive back to Canada. But there are other Canadians who are also suffering in China, and more specifically, right now, the case of Hussein Jalil being the most prominent one. He is a former imam. He is a human rights advocate. I mean, if we treat people who fight for justice for their own people in such a way, what kind of message are we sending to the world?
Not only that, what is a Canadian citizenship worth if you're not even going to get a consulate visit?
Absolutely, you're right.
And then you're coming around to look for my vote?
Exactly. And
I'm a taxpayer?
Yep. That's the sad part. That's the sad reality.
As an immigrant, what is our citizenship worth? Only the tax dollars we provide? And keep silent after that?
Exactly. That's what it seems.
How can Canadians get involved in these various campaigns?
We ask Canadians to, first of all, learn more about what's happening to Uyghur people, and learn from the voices of Uyghur people themselves, like Tunisia and others. Invites Uyghur people into your communities, your churches, your mosques, your community centers. Invite them on Zoom calls and ask them to share their stories and learn firsthand from what's happening. So education is going to be a very, very big component, because most people don't even know who Uyghurs are. Number two is to start advocating. And so first is educate, second is advocate. And advocating basically means sign a petition, sign a letter, wherever you find an opportunity. We ask you to go to justiceforallcanada.org and you can find our Save Uyghur campaign there. There are a couple of specific letter signing campaigns that we ask you to actually participate in. Send a letter to the Prime Minister and your MPs. Ask them what are they doing for Uyghur genocide. Yes, they will tell you we have passed a motion. That's great, but what is next? What are some legislative actions are you taking to end the ongoing genocide and the concentration camps and forced harvesting and forced labor and forced this and forced that? What are we doing about that? So become an advocate by going to justiceforallcanada.org and go specifically to Save Uyghur campaign. We ask you to, of course, donate to causes to individuals and organizations that are working on this cause. Once again, you can visit justiceforallcanada.org to donate, but there are other Uyghur organizations as well, wonderful groups that are doing some incredible work. This is the least you and I can do. Raise awareness, share on social media. There are lots of very powerful stories, articles, and op-eds coming out lately. Look for those and then basically make sure you promote as much as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Taha. Is Sister Tunisia still with us?
Yes, the video shows the Chinese restaurant. They made their floor with our old surah on the floor.
Yes,
and
I
then
saw that.
our shahadat, all the surah, and then they speak in Chinese. Oh, this is beautiful, beautiful, and then it's on the floor, and I feel it's not strange. Maybe other people find it's very strange because Chinese government already declared Islam is a virus, and while all the Islamic country take by just like a by standard, and then keep silence. And the same as Brother Taha said, we need to educate people about what's happening to Uyghur people and other Turkic people in East Turkistan. And it's already it's too late, but still we can do a lot if we really try to do something. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Tunisia. I just pray to God Almighty that you are safe, because in speaking out, I know you have endangered yourself. And these days, being in Canada is not necessarily a protection in itself. So may God Almighty protect and preserve you and your family here and back home, and save your people, who is our people, not only because they are Muslims, but because we belong to the same race, the human race. And it is extremely indecent, in my view, that what is happening to them from a shameless government, and the silence of Muslim governments and Muslim organizations and other liberal democracies world over is also shameless. And with that, viewers, thank you very much. Peace out.
Not in my name, not in